What's good, everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we're reacting to Game Theory, The Truth About Deltarune's Night. Now here's the thing, I was going to react to this one thing about Deltarune, but then I realized there was technically another theory involving Deltarune before it. So I said, you know what, just do it, and then we'll get to the other Deltarune one, because that one's a bit interesting too. So yeah, anyway, for those that don't know, but I highly doubt no one doesn't know this, but I guess for people like me who don't get updated about the new chapters, but Deltarune Chapter 5 came out, and I can't believe I missed it. I can't believe I missed it. I'm honestly stunned and ashamed that I was unaware of Deltarune existing. Well, Deltarune Chapter 5 existing. Man, that honestly sucks. Anyway, we got Chapter 5, and not else to really say, in all honesty. It's just that Chapter 5's out, and Chapter 6 is probably going to be the last chapter. Oh my god, I just realized something hilarious, and that's the fact that Poppy Playtime is, there's only one more chapter left of Poppy Playtime, and it's Chapter 6, and now there's probably one more thing of Deltarune, and it's Chapter 6. It's honestly kind of hilarious to me how that's happening. I'm also doing a reaction video to a Poppy Playtime video. Well, not Poppy Playtime, but more of a theory about Poppy Playtime that Game Theory did. Anyway, yeah. So, with this said, let's get around to this video. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button to notify immediately when a video comes out. All that other good stuff you should do and press. Or, well, for the... if there's any videos, again, that you want me to react to, just put it down in the comment section below, and I'll react to it as soon as possible. The link to this video is going to be down in the description below, so be sure to check there to see the original video, and be sure to give Game Theory some love and support for the video that they made. Now, with this said, let's actually get serious and into this video.
Deltarune Chapter 5 has more lore than people realise. On the surface, it may appear to just be a simple chapter about some flowery boys and girls, but this chapter reveals so much more about the game, what happened before the game started, and how the fate of one character may be worse than even I first realised. Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that wants you to wake up in a dark fountain and smell the flowers, because Deltarune is back. The story of a kid named Chris befriending the school bully Susie and entering the dark worlds. Worlds made up of real objects like playing cards and laptops that then transform into enemies to battle and new places to explore. With their Darkner friend Rolsei by their side, they are on a mission to destroy the dark fountains and prevent a cataclysmic event known in the prophecy as the Roaring, when the light and dark worlds will cease to exist. Each installment gives us more of an insight into the true story that Toby Fox is trying to tell us, but this chapter has already had some mixed reviews from fans, claiming there to be no plot or not adding to the lore at all, and instead just being all gameplay. Oh no, there's too much game in my video game! My steak is too juicy! My lobster is too buttery!
Wait, are you seriously complaining about that? That sounds amazing, in all honesty. Who would complain about 4 hours of gameplay? If anything, we should give Toby a round of applause. I mean, seriously. I mean, come on. The guy made a 4-hour-long chapter. Honestly, you could wish that you could wish for stuff like that from other games and all that. But usually people have to put in the small parts or something like that. But we get a 4-hour one? Gee. That's a bad habit. I gotta get rid of that. Anyway, yeah, I don't understand the thing about what's wrong with 4 hours of gameplay. That's actually pretty cool, in all honesty.
But while I agree this chapter focused more on the gameplay, that doesn't mean there's no lore at all. In fact, I believe it's actually giving us more context into some of the series' biggest mysteries, and sets up what we can expect in future chapters. The festival will have to wait, theorists, because it is time for us to open our own dark fountain and plunge back into the dark world of Deltarune. Although we only got one chapter this time around, it was much longer than previous chapters. It's the day of the festival, and Chris, Susie, and Noelle are exploring everything going on. Susie and Noelle end the day by the lake as they confess their feelings for one another. But when Susie goes to get ice cream, Noelle has to leave suddenly to help her sick father. Chris and Susie then stumble upon a dark fountain inside the flower shop owned by Chris's father, Asgore. And by stumble, I mean Chris went through the back door and made one. It's here that we meet Asgore's beloved flowers made real: aqua, green, orange, yellow, blue, Seth, and my new favorite character from the series, Flowery. I mean, just look at him, so sharply dressed. Game recognizes game, and while he can be a bit annoying,
like reference to Flowey.
annoying. Nothing is more annoying than Santi, and somehow I deal with him every day, so Flowery is no issue. But these aren't the only people in the Dark World. Asgore is here too, and while he acts oblivious to the whole thing, it is very clear that he is fully versed in the effects of the Dark World, studying them and becoming pretty obsessed. Chris and the Fun Gang then tried to stop Flowery and the team from keeping Asgore in the Dark World, fearing that the Knight, the enemy from the previous chapters, may come after him. But as they seal the Dark Fountain, the Dark World still remains. Normally, they collapse in on themselves when the Dark Fountain is closed, meaning the Knight has opened another one, and lo and behold, they swoop in and kidnap Asgore. Now with another member taken to the shelter, Chris and Susie feel downcast, returning to Castletown, ready for chapter 6. That's the basic summary of this new chapter, and I think the reason people have said that there's no real plot is mostly down to the fact that there's not a lot to say when it comes to things like the Deltarune prophecy, which was laid on pretty thick last year.
Yeah, that's true. But this is interesting, though. It didn't disappear. Asgore seems obsessed with it. And he's wearing his usual outfit. And the thing that's really interesting is the fact that all the flowers seem to represent one of each of the human children that came into the underground too. That led to Asgore stealing their souls and all that in Undertale. We got bravery, we got justice, we had kindness, or I can't remember all the names on the top of my head. That's weird. I usually remember them all very easily. There's patience. I think there's persevere.
Chapter. But that's because a lot of what we learn about in this chapter isn't about the prophecy. It's about the events that occurred before Deltarune. Like I said, Asgore is familiar with the Dark World, and as you venture into the castle of this chapter, you find research papers scattered everywhere that Asgore is trying to read. But the words are all mixed up. The key thing here is that Asgore calls them his old notes. Asgore has researched Dark Worlds in the past, and now being back in the Dark World, Asgore becomes obsessed with his research notes and getting answers. The reason that the notes are jumbled is because they're from the Light World, and like how our pencil becomes a sword when we enter the Dark World, these notes have distorted, and so the words have become jumbled. Fortunately for us, Ralsei is able to interpret some of these notes, revealing that there used to be a Dark World a long time ago. The further into this chapter we get, the more we understand Asgore's obsession with the Dark World. He wants to prove that it is real in order to stop feeling guilty over an incident, something he also refuses to elaborate on. He says that he blames himself for what happened, despite Chris, Asriel, and Toriel never blaming him. His desire to prove his innocence is actually what drove Toriel away, which is why they're now separated. So naturally, this had me wondering, what was this incident? What was the thing that happened in the world of light that drove Asgore to feel guilty, and how is it connected to this old Dark World? You see, there is one unspoken tragic event that we know occurred before the events of Deltarune: the disappearance of Noelle's sister, December Holiday. Until now, Des has been a mystery. In Chapter 4, we saw that Des's room was abandoned and that no one was allowed inside. Whatever happened, both Chris and Noelle seem pretty traumatized by this event. Noelle is triggered by the word in a spelling bee and breaks down. And Chris seems to have witnessed this event firsthand. In Chapter 3, you can pick up a piece of black triangle lacquer, which we spoke about in our last theory. Triangle lacquer describes a guitar pick, and Des is a talented musician specializing in the guitar, as seen by the guitar in her room. However, when you collect the item, it talks about the item slipping through your fingers. If this item represents Des, it's the idea that Chris felt like they could have done something to help them, to save them, but they slipped through their fingers. In Chapter 4, you can find a secret area called the therapy room. In this room, Chris is encouraged to do art, a real therapeutic tool to help traumatized patients express themselves and lower stress levels. You combine this with the fact that Chris is told that this is where we draw pictures and don't kill people, and we start to piece together that Chris was either involved in or most likely witnessed something that they believed was killing someone, something they feel they could have helped avoid. Unlike Azrael, it is clear that Des didn't run off to college, but something far more tragic happened. And now it seems that Asgore was involved and that his research into the Dark World may have been the reason. But there is more that connects these two characters than just a nameless incident. During Chapter 4, if you escape through the vents after Chris violently removes you from their chest, you can see Asgore talking to an old friend about their plans for redemption. During this discussion, he mentions how beautiful this black shard is. The black shard is actually an item in Deltarune that you can obtain. The only way to obtain it is by defeating the knight. By doing so, you break off a piece of their sword, a shard, if you will. In our last theory, we theorized that Des is the Roaring Knight, based on visual clues like the antlers, their sword being a bat, something that Des used to hold on to, and that the song Lost.ogg, which used a picture of the guitar from Des's room, uses the same musical motif in the knight fighting music. For Asgore to have this shard, they would have to have some connection to the knight prior to Chapter 4, and prior to their kidnapping at the end of Chapter 5. On top of that, they both have access to the shelter. The knight is stealing people away and hiding in this shelter, and at the end of Chapter 5, we finally get one of the codes to the shelter, and it's buried in Asgore's flower shop under Flowery. The code is 0915199X. I'd put my money on the fact that this is the date it happened, September 15th, 1990 something. The only date we've seen that resembles this is 1997. Spamton claims that it's their favorite.
Oh. Now, Spamton's involved. Okay. So, let me see if I got a basic summary. So, Asgore's research into the Dark World is what led to his separation with Toriel this time around. But it's not due to his research itself. Because it seems and sounds like Toriel understands that research is a thing and all that. It was the issue of Asgore's justification of the research that actually got to Toriel. Okay. And then there was an incident that potentially happened that Asgore is trying to make up for, which is interesting in all honesty. This makes me wonder if Noelle actually has been to the Darker World in the past, and because of the incident, she got traumatized to the point that she locked the memories away and can't recall them.
Yeah, and it's actually the price of the thorn ring that creates the Snowgrave or Weird root for Noelle, Des's sister, who, thanks to this root, and some pushing from us, becomes stronger and able to overcome her trauma about Des's disappearance. Now, while we know Chris likely witnessed this event and that Asgore was involved, probably along with Carol, as she seems to be the one calling Chris, telling him not to let Susie know the shelter code, and then shows up as soon as Susie's about to find it, but we don't know exactly what happened that night with Des. However, thanks to unused text in the game files, we do know what happened in the aftermath. Chapter 1's unused text said, Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone? Anyone? Can anyone hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something, please. Chapter 2 and 3's are similar, realizing that no one can hear them and wondering how they got there. In Chapter 4's unused text, this mystery person talks about losing track of time, whether it's been hours or days. The community has speculated that this is Des getting lost in the dark world, and I was inclined to think so as well. But now with the idea that Des suffered an incident involving a dark world like Asgore mentioned, it makes me even more certain that this is the case. But Chapter 5's unused text gives us a little more insight. I do have one thing though, and that's memories. Memories of my life. Maybe that's all I am at this point, a collection of memory. Then all I can do is not forget, right? Don't forget. I just have to keep telling myself that. This isn't the first time we've heard that phrase, don't forget. At the end of Chapter 4, Chris gets another call, presumably once again from Carol, who tells them, don't forget. As we've talked about previously, Chris is somehow involved with the Knight. The Knight literally knights them in Chapter 3, and as I've also said, Carol seems suspiciously involved with this whole thing. And if you go down the weird route where we force Noelle to become violent, you encounter Sans, who is selling ice cream. Sans asks Susie to draw her friends on a punch card, and she draws her, Chris, and Ralsei. At first, this might seem like a random interaction just so Sans can have a little bit more screen time because, you know, we love that guy. But fans will know that in Undertale, if you go to the secret lab, you will find a poorly drawn picture of 3 smiling people, and underneath it, it is written, don't forget. And if you've been following these channels for a long time, you will know that one of the theories we had from Undertale was that Sans was working in this secret lab alongside Gasta. Now, I don't have time to do a deep dive into the weird roots or the connections it has with Sans and Gasta right now, but I do think it holds some really interesting lore secrets that I want to talk about in a few weeks, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss that video when it...
And that's the video I was talking about in the beginning. No, seriously, that is. Which is why I decided to do this video first and not that one. Because I figured that there might be a connection between both videos. So
it drops. Thanks very much. But back to the point. Memories and remembering those memories are important. Des, a Lightner, has been in the Dark World for so long that they have lost track of time and are losing everything about themselves except their memories, to the point where they seem to think they are just memories, no bodily form or anything. Des's determination to remember is what is keeping them alive in a sense, and we all remember how important determination is in this series. This is how the Knight was created from Des. We know the Dark World takes form from real-world objects distorted by the darkness. But this dialogue does bring up a question. What happens if that object or person remains distorted for too long? They soon begin to lose who they truly are. The Knight isn't Des directly, but rather a distortion of their memories. This is why they share visual similarities to Des, but don't look like a Dark World version of them like we see with Chris, Susie, or Noelle. They behave instead more like a monster than a Darkner, screaming out. It's taken the memories of Des and become something else. The Knight is an amalgamation of Des's determination to survive and their memories, distorted into this beast who is trying to bring about the Roaring, an event that will bring everyone into darkness just like them. Des is trying not to forget their memory or else they will lose themselves completely. In the same way, Sans writes don't forget on that punch card because he's saying don't forget the memory of the weird route because this path only leads to destruction. Noelle is choosing violence out of grief of losing her sibling, with the hope of becoming stronger and escaping this pain. And that is truly what Chapter 5 is all about. What I saw when playing this chapter was how everyone is dealing with the tragic loss of Des Holiday. Something that tragic, losing someone important, can lead people to grieve in different ways. And we are seeing how that is affecting everyone. Asgore's grief in losing their family, friends, child led Asgore to blame himself, to the point where he became obsessed with proving it wasn't his fault. Asgore is grieving and is trying to find answers for what happened. It's denial. Noelle starts out becoming completely paralyzed by the mere mention of December, but now has been given some level of autonomy by Chris, or rather the soul inside Chris. Noelle is now desperate to take matters into her own hands, frustrated at the boring life she lives. She says to Chris that she wants to grow wings and fly away from this stupid town. She wants escape. This is anger. We know that Chris was friends with Des and is opening dark fountains and more dark worlds. They are trying to bring about the Roaring along along with the night, and we talked about their art therapy that they're going through. This is Chris grieving the loss of a childhood friend that slipped through their fingers, and by working with someone doing what they say to possibly bring Des back, that is bargaining. Even the night is a symbol of Des's grief in losing themselves. Having nothing left, all alone, the night was born and determined to plunge everyone into the same darkness they felt, to feel just as abandoned as them. This is depression, the loss of one's self. The only stage of grief we haven't seen yet is acceptance, and maybe that's how the night will be stopped. Once everyone, Asgore, Noelle, Chris, and everyone else involved with Des chooses to accept that they are truly gone. Only then can they move on and the prophecy can be fulfilled. Because if these people continue to grieve and indulge in their obsessions with the Dark Worlds, they are all at risk of meeting the same fate as Des, and that is being made clear with Susie. Using the clues from Asgore's story and the unused text files, we have seen that Des may have become the Knight due to being a Lightner who stayed in a Dark World for too long, slowly losing themselves and letting the Dark World distort them into the Knight. If this is true, then I believe it foreshadows Susie's fate in Deltarune. At the end of chapter 5, having lost Asgore to the Knight and killing Flowery, Susie is sad and grief-stricken. She failed to save the day and the Knight still caused chaos. Susie then asks Chris to take her home. If you take her to the apartment block she lives in, she says, "You know that's not really what I meant, right? But if you take her back to school, into the Castletown Dark World," Susie says, "Thanks for walking me home." Susie has had a troubled past in family life, and during these adventures with Chris and Ralsei, Susie has become a nicer person and grown attached to the darkness like Lancer, to the point where now we see Susie is calling this place her home. Even at the start of the chapter, Susie has been in Castletown getting ready for her date with Noelle. Susie is spending increasingly more time in the Dark World than the Light World. Right now, it's sweet. She's found somewhere she feels she belongs. But if what we've learned about Des becoming the Knight is true, then the more time Susie is in the Dark World, the more of her true self she will lose. She will forget herself and distort beyond recognition. Maybe that's where our prediction for the prophecy that we talked about last time will come into play. In the last chapter, we saw a bunch of pains that told us the true prophecy of the Deltarune. However, Susie smashed one of them and seemed upset by what she saw, and Ralsei had been really sketchy about the whole thing and felt really sorry for her. We tried to put the pieces back together and came up with this. And then when all hope is lost for the tale, the final tragedy unveils. To save the world, there is only one way. The girl's death breaks the angel's sway. Only then will the worlds be saved. We thought that this was a heroic sacrifice from Susie, and so when she saw it, she smashed it because she didn't want to accept it, and that's why Ralsei was also trying to dodge the subject. But what if what she saw wasn't her death, so to speak, but her becoming a villain who then has to be slain to save the world? Flowey actually alludes to this pretty directly just before the final battle. He suggests destroying Castletown's fountain and leaving theirs alive instead, asking Susie if she would take away someone else's fantasy to keep her own. Susie naturally snaps back about how it's her home, and Flowery simply replies, "Spoken like a true hero," Susie putting hero in quotation marks. Susie is becoming delusional, living in her fantasy world, and over time will start to forget who she really is. Right now, she's our closest friend, but if she keeps hanging out in the Dark World, she may become our greatest enemy. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
That's actually an interesting one. Another possibility is that in order to stop the Knight, Susie has to distort herself to a point that she will, transform and counteract the Knight, and they take each other out. That is a possibility when you think about it, and maybe that's the thing Susie hated. Not a heroic sacrifice, but more of the only way to probably do such a thing is for, the Dark Fountain and the school to be destroyed, and she snaps because of it, and bam. So in order to make sure they win, she has to lose everything. That might be what is going to happen when I think about it. It seems like a very strong possibility, but other than that, I can't really say. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what your theories on what Chapter 6 is going to be about and the fate of Susie in general. I'd like to hear your opinions on this matter because it seems like there's a few. So again, hope you all enjoy, and I'll be sure to see you all on the next one. Bye, everyone.